Guess so.
All right, well, we can go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our Find Your Ancestors session. I'm Katie Stope. I'm the local history librarian here at Appleton Public Library in Appleton, Wisconsin. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for our webinar on using maps in genealogy and local history. Before we dive into our program, I just have a couple of quick announcements. So first, a huge thanks to the Friends of the Appleton Public Library for providing funding for our Find Your Ancestors series and allowing us to continue bringing amazing speakers every month. We definitely couldn't do it without their support. For those unfamiliar, the Find Your Ancestors series happens once a month, every month. So definitely check out the handout. I've posted a link in the chat, and are posted a couple times throughout our session today. So you can take a look at that handout and see what upcoming programs we have. Our next Find Your Ancestors session is going to be February 11th at 2 p.m. Central. We're going to host the legal genealogist, Judy Russell, to talk about probates and wills. We're not going to be able to record that session, so you definitely want to mark your calendars and be sure to attend live because Judy Russell is amazing if you haven't attended one of her presentations. Then in March, we're going to be discussing bounty lands and military pensions with Deborah Dudick. And in April, we're going to host Angie Knutson, who's going to walk us through how to preserve family photos and heirlooms. So take a look at that handout for those dates and registration links. I also have a link to our events calendar where we have up to September planned out for Find Your Ancestors this year. And hopefully I'll be adding the rest of the 2023 dates soon. Just a reminder, even if you do register for those upcoming programs today, you're going to get a reminder email a week before, a day before, and an hour before the program with that information on joining the program. If you missed any of our past Find Your Ancestors sessions, definitely check out our YouTube channel. We have a link to that in the handout. Of course, not every presentation is recorded or up there indefinitely, so be sure to register and attend live if you're able to. We are able to record today's session and are send out an email on Monday with a link to that recording for you. And if you missed Lee's last talk on researching institutionalized ancestors, you definitely want to check out our YouTube channel because that was a great video that we had from his last time. If you have any questions during today's session, you can use the Q&A box located on the bottom of your screen and we'll answer questions at the end. Closed captioning is also enabled if you need it. You're able to push that button at the bottom of your screen. Just be aware, since it's a live transcript, it's not 100% accurate. If you have any library-specific questions or need help navigating any of our library's genealogy databases, definitely feel free to reach out to me. My email address is in that first page of the handout, and I also offer one-on-one sessions via Zoom or in person at the library to help you learn more about how to use those genealogy databases or help you tackle your genealogy research questions. So take a look at that and feel free to book an appointment with me. Finally, at the end of today's presentation, there's a short survey from Project Outcome, which is an American Library Association sponsored initiative. If you could just take a minute to fill out the survey, it's only a short 8 questions. We would greatly appreciate your feedback. And there's also a spot on the survey to let us know what future topics you'd like us to tackle in future Find Your Ancestors sessions. So without further ado, let me introduce our speaker today. Today we have Lee Grady. He's the Senior Reference Archivist at the Wisconsin Historical Society. He has master's degrees in American History and Library and Information Studies from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and he has been on the staff at the Historical Society for over 25 years and has a wide range of experience with the Society's archival collection. So welcome, Lee.
Thank you, Katie. And that senior in the Senior Reference Archivist, just a few words on that. If you see me leaning back a little bit, that means I have like this shoulder spasm I'm dealing with right now. So that's what happens when you become Senior Reference Archivist. And then the gravel, a little bit of gravel in my voice is because I had to was at a big meeting a couple days ago where we were shouting at each other, not in anger, but just to be heard. And so my voice is a little gravelly. And to top that off, I might have to lean forward disturbingly. I don't know if you can they see my head on here? Probably, huh? So sometimes to read my own slide or my own notes. So just, bear with me. I'm an old guy that's falling apart here a little bit. So I don't know if any of you, I have no idea who's out there. If you've been to the Historical Society before in Madison, usually if I'm doing something in person, I ask you to raise your hand, but I can't see anybody's hand anyway. Go ahead and raise them anyway. Why not? So we are located in Madison. We are a North American history library and archives, and we're affiliated with the University of Wisconsin. So our collections go well beyond Wisconsin. With that said, today's talk is going to focus on a lot of Wisconsin examples, It's what I deal with mostly in the archives when it comes to maps. But there's a lot of things that I'm going to show you that are going to be applicable to other parts of the country. So hopefully, if you don't have any Wisconsin ancestors, it's not going to be a waste. You'll still be able to apply some of what you learn to other places in the country. So today's subject, maps for genealogy and local history. I'm going to talk probably the longest about rural land and the people who live there, and using maps and related sources to sort of figure out where they lived and what that place was like, and some details about that. A little quick intermission mentioning ghost towns, towns that have disappeared over time, and you're trying to track them down. And then finally move on to cities and towns. So using maps to not only track, but find out more about the neighborhoods your ancestors lived in, if they lived in a municipality like a city or a village. So I'm going to start with the rural lands and the people who live there. And I'm going to start off with plat maps, and that's probably the type of map that all of you are familiar with already, if you've done any kind of genealogy. They show land ownership. And I want to warn you right away that because I am giving the talk, I'm using my own examples. I'm using examples from my own family a lot of times. So I'm going to talk in this section about my ancestor, Otto Grady, who came from Germany as a kid, actually a little kid, and then ended up buying property in Brown County, Wisconsin, in northeastern Wisconsin. One of the first things a lot of us do when we figure out that our ancestor was living on a farm somewhere is look at a plat map to figure out exactly where that was. You can use other sources. I mean, the most direct way is to find a deed. In Wisconsin, deeds are kept at the counties, the county registers of deeds offices. We do have some copies of deeds for some counties at the Historical Society, but the sort of place of record is the Register of Deeds office. So I could go to Brown County and look up Otto Grady and find exactly when he bought the property and what the legal land description was, and when the property was sold or willed on to somebody else. That's sort of the most direct way to do it. But an easy way, if you have access to the plat maps, is to look at a plat map. So this is, and the way we usually figure out where to start looking is from a census record. So Otto Grady and his family, his wife Ida and his children in 1900 are in the town of Swamico in Brown County. And that's where I started looking. And the closest plat map before 1900 that I could find for Brown County in our collection was from 1889. So that's what I used. I think what I'm going to do here is just jump ahead. And if you zoom in on that map, you'll see down in section 33, follow the railroad track that runs right down through the middle of the image there. And in section 33, you'll see O Grady and then L Grady. O Grady is Otto, L is his brother Lewis. You'll see Otto Grady it says a number 37 there next to a square. Maybe I'll move my mouse. I don't know if you guys can see my mouse. I hope you can. But I'm circling with my mouse Otto Grady right here. It says 37 acres because he's got a railroad track running through his property. He only has 37 acres because there's a railroad right of way there. As you'll see, as we go through figuring out what his farm was like, or what the land was like, it's not premium farmland. It's not top of the line property. He came to that county a little late and had to buy what was left and what he could afford. So it's not the greatest choice piece of land, as you'll see. I'm going to back up a second to the last slide again, and I don't know if you can see this, but near the top of the township there, as you look through plat books and plat maps, you'll notice that towns or townships often have a civil name. So this one's called Swamico, but they also have a numerical designation, a legal land description, a township and a range number. And those were laid out by surveyors who walked across Wisconsin and the entire US for that matter. But in Wisconsin, they started surveying in the early 1830s and worked their way northwest to the top corner of the state over a 30+ year period, laying out all the towns, laying out all the sections within. A typical town has 36 sections. Each section has something like, I think it's 640 acres. So the surveyors laid those out, and as they did, they assigned them a number. I won't get into how that works exactly. If somebody has a question about that, I can give my best shot at it at the end. But you'll see along the top here under the name Suamico, it says Township 25 North, Range 20 and 21 East. In this case, there's two ranges because along the right-hand side here, most of Range 21 East is actually in the Bay of Green Bay on the right here. There's a tiny little sliver here that is part of, that is on land that's part of the 21 East. So most of what you see here is Range 20 East. So Township 25 North, Range 20 East is a basic part of the legal land description for Otto. If you go forward again and look here, he's in section 33, this square here, you see the number, this it's kind of this square 640 acre square here. And he's in section 33 of Township 25 North, Range 20 East. And if you break it down further than that, you can break down any one of these sections into quarters or halves. Typically, that's what they do first. So we'll just say he's in the northeast quarter. So this is what I'm circling here, the northeast quarter of section 33 of Township 25 North, Range 20 East. And breaking that down further, that quarter you can divide into halves and quarters. So W.G. Burton here, that I'm circling with my mouse again, is in the north half of the northeast quarter of section 33. Otto, though, is in the southwest quarter of the northeast quarter of section 33, Township 25 North, Range 20 East. If any of you have looked at the looked up original land patents on the federal government Bureau of Land Management site, they have a search you can do, and you can search by that legal land description, but that's what you'll see if you search for a name too. On the land patent, you'll see the U.S. government grants, W.G. Burton, and then it will list out the north half of the northeast quarter of section 33, Township 25 North, Range 20 East. That's the legal land description for a rural property. And it's worth going over that because some of the sources I'm going to show you in a minute are all built off of that original survey and that original land description. The other thing I would say before I move on off of plat maps, because I know, again, you're all familiar, just bear with me. I found it really useful to go back to these sources from time to time. It's true of almost all genealogical sources, but when I first looked at this, I found Otto Grady in the census, and I rushed trying to find the map, and I looked and found him on the map, and then I tried to figure out where is that today. So at some point I can go and drive over there and take a look at it, which is all great. And I noted how many acres he had, and I saw Louis Grady, his brother, is right next door. But I didn't really take the time to study the other details. And when I went back later, I noticed some things I'd missed the first time. Well, for one thing, you're further along in your research, you're going to recognize probably some surnames of in-laws who live nearby or in the same township. It's very common people to marry, and I know that now that Hagel, it's down on the bottom of section 33 here, is an in-law. So I didn't necessarily notice all of that stuff the first time I came through here, but going back and looking, you start noticing those connections. The other thing is that plat maps like this comes from an atlas. It's a big bound volume, and each page is a township. They vary in the detail they show, but a lot of them will show, like this one, if you look up toward the left-hand side here under section 29, where I'm circling with my mouse, you'll see it's school number 2 is there. So it's a rural schoolhouse is noted. Sometimes they'll note things like cemeteries or cheese factories, other kinds of features. Of course, I saw the railroad track going through there, and that explains why he doesn't have the full 40 acres. But that also is, he's had to farm a 40-acre plot that has a railroad running right through it. It also shows things like streams and roads. The early ones don't often name the roads, but it shows where the roads were. And a lot of times you can look at a more modern map and match them up to those old roads. So just a plug for really taking time with sources like this and studying them and seeing what you can get out of them, and then go back to them later again, because you'll often discover things that you missed the first time. Okay, so now I've got the plat map. what I do now is different than what I used to do, or when I first looked up Otto way back and looked at the plat map. Now there's a great source out there that is almost always my second source after I look at a plat map. It's called the Wisconsin Historic Aerial Image Finder. It's online and it's done by the Robinson Map Library here on the UW campus. I'm pretty sure it's somewhere in the handout I gave you or that we sent, but if it's not, I have my email address on the first slide. I'll have it again at the end. And, I spend a good deal of my time answering emails. So bring it on, send as much email as you like, ask any questions. Should have said that right off the top. So let me take you, let's see if this works. Let me take you to the aerial image finder. And actually the way I do that, I didn't want to go directly there. I wanted to show you what I almost always do to find it is just type in Google Wisconsin aerial image finder. It's actually historic aerial image finder, but this will usually do it. And here it is right here at the top. And this is, I love the interface on this website. It's incredibly useful. So let me, the first thing is, let's say you don't know the legal land description. You kind of roughly already know where somebody lives, but you don't know what the township number is, or, where one of your ancestors live. You can use this source to find that. If you zoom in and continue to zoom in, you'll start to see it has an overlaid grid over an aerial image with all the roads and highways and everything noted. And it'll tell you the township 27 north, range 2 west. You can keep zooming in and it starts to show you the section numbers. So these are the same section numbers or the same numbering system that you saw in that 1889 map and that you'll find on any early plat map, from the 19th century and then going all the way forward to the present day. Those section numbers and township numbers are still valid. And you can use a source like this to find a current location and figure out that legal land description almost instantly. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to back all the way back out of here. So hope I'm not making you nauseous or anything. Up in the upper left corner is this blue search. You can search, the search works fairly well. You could try a street address. You can just try searching for a county. You can just type in the name. Like I could type in Swamico, for example, as a town, or Green Bay as a city. But I have this township range and section here, so I wanted to use that. So remember, it was 25 north, and I think because all Wisconsin towns are north, they don't even give you the north option. They just assume it's north. And then 20 east, drop down here, 20, and then east. And then it was section 33 that Otto was in, right there. And it's going to jump you right to that section 33. Here's, if I zoom in a little bit, you can see that there's still a highway and a railroad track that goes right through there. And I don't know if if you remember from the map, this is sort of section 33. Here's the center. So Otto is in this quarter here, was in this quarter right here that I'm circling with my mouse back in, the 1880s, not 1890s. And then his son took over the farm. And then my dad actually grew up on that farm. So it wasn't quite that much of a mystery as to where it was. I kind of knew where it was, but I'm using it as an example because I know it so well. So anyway, so this is a sort of aerial view today, and it's really helpful because it's telling me I want to go to Velp Avenue and Sunny Lane, so I could plug that into my phone if I'm up there in northeastern Wisconsin and just take a drive out there. And when you do take a drive out there, you can still see there's still an old barn. You can't really see it very well here, but there's an old barn there. The house burned down a long time ago, but there's an old barn. There's some vestiges of the farm. And this is like I said, this is sort of like the first place I go. And one other thing, this isn't the reason, all this stuff I showed you is not the reason that Robinson Map Library created this. They created it for a totally different reason, which is pretty cool too. Let me close this out of here so it's not in the way. So here's section 33 again. Now you see these white dots that I'm kind of sprinkled around. The reason Robinson Map Library created this interface was because they have a full set of aerial photos of the state from 1937 and 1938. And this is their interface for finding those. So now that we found a location, if I hold my mouse over one of these white dots like this one, an aerial view from a photograph from 1937 comes up of the same exact spot. So at that point, my great-grandfather's farm and grandmother's farm was still there. They weren't alive anymore, but their son was, who was occupying the farm. If I click on that, it'll give me an option to download a large TIFF. Actually, I said it was 37. It tells you right here that photo was taken June 29th, 1938. But just one of the great things again about this source is that it covers the entire state of Wisconsin. Now, I don't know if there's an analog to this. I don't think there's probably an exact analog to this in other states, but the plat maps still hold, and the way that the townships and ranges are laid out. But if you have a property in Wisconsin that you're interested in, this is just a wonderful site. So hats off to Robinson Map Library on that one. All right, so we're gonna go back to the slides here. Okay, so we have this township and range. We sort of see where it is today, that Velp and Sunny Lane. We see an aerial view. Now with Google Maps, you could probably plug that intersection into Google Maps and see a street view, and you maybe don't even have to drive there, and you can kind of look around with the miracle of technology. Well, I mentioned that those townships and ranges were created by surveyors in the 1830s, 40s, and 50s. Well, those surveyors, when they were walking on foot up and down those section lines, so going back, thinking back to, well, you don't have to think, I can just go back here. So section 33 in that township, a surveyor walked up each one of those boundary lines. So the line between 32 and 33, which is this line, the line between 33 and 34, which is this line that I'm moving with my mouse here, the line between 33 and 28. So the surveyor physically walked along these lines, set some posts, and marked some trees that were sentinel trees that ran along those lines back in like 1840 in northeastern Wisconsin. If it's southern Wisconsin, it might have been as early as 1832 or somewhere around there. So even before Wisconsin was a territory, there were surveyors already walking these lines and setting posts. So when the surveyor did that, get back down here, they kept notes. They carried a notebook with them. And they also carried some paper, and they sometimes sketched their own maps. So they're taking down this information in the 1830s and 40s and 50s, before white immigrants, before settlers had started coming in and cutting down trees and plowing fields and completely transforming the landscape. So it's really the earliest source we have, and it covers the entire state again. That's the other great thing about it. So I wish we could take credit for digitizing this material, but it was actually the Board of Commissioner of Public Lands in Wisconsin. And I just clicked to go. This time I went right there. I think, again, I have this URL on your handout, but you can Google, if you Google Surveyors Field Notes Wisconsin, this is the first thing that comes up. This is not quite as elegant an interface as we saw with Robinson Map Library, but in defense of the Commissioner of Public Lands, they did this several years ago. So this is a little bit of a dated interface. I'm going to click search here on the upper left. And here's a map of Wisconsin. I did just notice you can also do the township. I never noticed that. You can click here on a county and then click on a township if you want to do it visually. Let me try this. It's kind of dangerous to try something for the first time in front of everybody, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to choose 25 north, 20 east. Wait a second. That's west. Okay. 20 east. And I'm going to leave it open to all sections just to show you what it looks like when you get to a. So again, a little bit of a dated interface, but these are links to scans of pages from the notebooks of the surveyors. If you remember, Otto was in section 33, and I showed you how there's like lines between the sections, like between section 32 and 33 and 33 and 34. So in this first bunch here, it says September 1840 is when this survey was done. And I'm going to try, I can't remember which one's best, but I'm going to try this 33 and 34. So that'd be that section line that I think ran along the right-hand edge of that. It's fairly close to where Otto was. So here's the page from the surveyor's notebook. On the left here, you can magnify things kind of in an old style way. And it says the surveyor's heading south And then these measurements on the left, 10, 14.5, 20.48, 27.53, 40.00. Those are in, I think in chains or rods, or I should look that up again, but some sort of surveyor's measurement. There's probably something on the website that'll tell you that. If you wanted to start at the top of the section and recreate the path that surveyor took back in 1840, you could do that, and go along and sort of figure out exactly where he says here he enters a black ash swamp, and then he leaves the black ash swamp, or leaves same. He sees a birch tree and measures the trunk at 12 inches diameter. So these are these sentinel trees. Yeah, this is the one. I've looked at this before, and I swear that what he's saying here, there's a brook, and I think he's saying it's beautiful, which seems a little out of character. If you think I'm wrong about that, I don't know what else it would be, but it looks like it's beautiful. I guess he just came out of a swamp, so I mean the bar isn't set very high, but it's kind of neat to think a surveyor would be walking along doing this job, and so ran across a brook and wrote in his notebook that it was beautiful. He sets a post here, a section post. He sees a maple tree, again hemlock. Then he enters a cedar swamp again. So you might be noticing a pattern here. And as I said, wasn't the best piece of land for farming. So Otto, back still in the 1880s, I'm sure it was still a little swampy, a lot of swamp noted there. And then he's got the railroad going through it too. So again, I just suspect he didn't have a lot of funds, and he's starting off on his own. And he doesn't have the first choice. And the other part of that is that that was surveyed in 1840. So you can see by this, it was surveyed in 1840, and Otto didn't buy it till 1889. So that land, wasn't used as a farm, I don't think, until 1880. I think he started about 1880. So about 40 years later. And I think, again, it was by the time he was buying land in Brown County, that county was pretty well settled. So he's got to settle for whatever he can get. But, this is more than a lot of genealogists will do. Not me, because there's only so much information out there. So I'm always trying to figure out as much as I can about what was the land like when he got there. What did he have to do to make it farmable? What did he face? And I think it's just cool to figure out what the landscape was like in that area. I can go drive there now, and this applies if you're doing like local history, especially, or if you just want to know the history of a piece of property or a piece of land beyond just the names of the people who lived there and when they arrived, but also what the landscape was like and how it changed over time. So that's the surveyor's field notes. About 100 years later, from the surveyor's field notes in the 1930s, this is during the Great Depression, and I'm guessing it was one of those work projects. They were trying to put people back to work. They had surveyors fan out across the state of Wisconsin and resurvey the entire state. It was called the Land Economic Inventory. Another name was the Bordner Survey, because it was named after the guy John Bordner, who was leading the project. But it's land economic inventory. They're not laying out section lines anymore. They're not revising anything. But what they're doing is they're taking an inventory of the value of the land is what they're doing. So what kind of crops are growing there? What kinds of trees? In terms of timber, like value, again, harvesting material. They noted animals, but mostly game animals like partridge or deer. Things that had a value in their eyes. Also, human-made structures like dams, and again, cheese factories and buildings and houses and unoccupied houses or abandoned houses. Lots of little pieces of information, types of grassland or shrub in fairly good detail. And they did this for the entire state again. So again, if you're looking at a specific piece of property like Otto's farm again, which I was looking at, you get that view in 1889 on that plat map, and then you can go back to 1840 and get a view when it was first surveyed, and then jump ahead to 1937 or 38 again, right around the time of those aerial photos I showed you, and then see a surveyor's notes. Now, we have the original worksheets that the surveyors used in our archives. So you could take any section of any township in Wisconsin and see one of these original worksheets that surveyor walked around with in 1937 and 38. And these little, it's probably impossible to read, but outside of the square where the map is, it's like a checklist with codes. There's letters that refer to types of trees, or whether it's an occupied building, or if it's a dirt road or a gravel road or a paved road, all kinds of symbols. That's what the surveyor is using to then write in that little map letters and making little code notations. If I zoom in here a little bit, you can see it more clearly. And then I added a key on the right to what some of those symbols mean. CL is cleared land, or often cropland. So not surprisingly, again, those are almost all farms at that point. Here you see the old railroad track again. You see some roads, some paved roads, a dirt road, the dotted line showing a dirt road. The squares show occupied houses. So the house that was Otto's originally, he's long gone by that time, but his son was living in is shown in there. Little dotted lines are sort of like boundary of grass versus bushes versus trees, sort of like little natural boundaries. And you see again, the good old swamp hardwoods again, A3. So still the vestiges of the old swampland that used to be there before Otto and his brother tried to farm it. Some willow, cover boundaries, so forth and so on. Again, not for every genealogist, but keep it tucked away if you're somebody like me that obsessively wants to uncover every detail I can, because unfortunately most of my ancestors did not leave diaries and lots of written records telling me how they felt or what it was like where they were. They didn't take a lot of photos early on, not at least of their surroundings. They took photos of themselves sometimes or had portraits made. But so I'm always trying to uncover a little extra information. But then you might be in a position at some point just to be curious about the history of a piece of property aside from who was there. Say if you live on a farm now, for example, and you're kind of curious. Okay. There also, so that you have to come to the archives to see. That's sort of severe, those original notes, the most detailed record we have. But there's a slightly less detailed published version of those maps that is available online. Again, it's called the Land Economic Inventory. I'm pretty sure I've got a link to it, but if you have trouble finding it, I'm gonna just send that email to Ask Archives and I can show you where it is. It's in UW Digital Collections. Again, don't worry too much. I'll demonstrate it here, but if you can't figure it out, I walk people through on the phone through this kind of thing all the time, no problem, or try to walk you through it by email. But there's a browse the collection button over here on the right. And I'm gonna, actually don't want to browse, I want to search up here in the search box, and I'm gonna do Swamico because this is one resource, the only one so far that you can't really search by the township and range. It uses the civil town name. So here's part of Swamico Township. I'm going fast here. I know I'm back up here in a second. So brought that up, and I'm going to click the little blue plus sign to enlarge it. And then I'm going to use my scroll wheel on my mouse to zoom in and find section 33 right down here again. And this is sort of a slightly less detailed summary of what you saw in that surveyor's handwritten version. And there are down on the bottom, there's a key to all the different symbols. As I said, things like beaver dam and nursery, and where there's erosion, a fire tower, a spring, gravel pits are noted, types of trees, animals, types of roads, and how good the roads are. And then a bunch of buildings. You can find out where all the taverns are. I suspect there were a lot of them. Well, I don't suspect, we all know that, right? It is Wisconsin. So Land Economic Inventory, the published version online, maybe that's enough for you. If you want to come and see the original handwritten, you can. If you are in the state of Wisconsin, this might be a good point to mention that we have an area research center network throughout Wisconsin. They're mostly at the system schools like UW Green Bay, UW Oshkosh. We have one up in Ashland and Eau Claire, La Crosse, Platteville, Whitewater. I'm going to forget something, Milwaukee. At any rate, we do transfer even original archival material. We can't transfer maps because they're just too large and fragile to send in a bin to someplace. But those land economic inventory, those original field notes and those worksheets, those are in regular archives boxes. And if you were up at UW Green Bay, you could ask them to have a box for whatever county you're interested in sent up there temporarily so that you can look at it up there. So you don't necessarily have to travel to Madison. That goes with the next source I have is the same thing, except we can't transfer this one, but it's also something that is only in the room. It's in paper form. It hasn't been digitized. It's only in the room. Wisconsin Archaeological Atlas, or we also call it the Charles Brown Atlas. Again, it's built on the same sort of underpinnings of a plat map. I'll show it to you while I talk here so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Our archaeology office, our archaeologists, starting in the 1920s, I think it was in 1924 or 25, they took a statewide set of plat maps, and you see an example of one sheet right here for Swamico Township, and they annotated by hand over the years, over the coming years, like over the next 10, 20, 30 years, as they gathered data from field research about where they found, where archaeological sites were for Native American inhabitation of this land, things like village sites and mounds and trails and sugar bushes, mines and cornfields. So archaeological evidence for the people living, indigenous people living in the land, on the landscape of Wisconsin. They noted it in red. Now it's not accurate enough to geolocate these things because it's just people writing with a ballpoint pen or a red pen on a map. But they do give you a sense for the life, the community, the things that were happening there. And if I zoom, I'm going to zoom in one more so you can sort of, again, here's the Swamico Township. This is it's a 1924 plat map that was written on. So you can still see Otto, he's still alive here. And now Lewis has moved to one square over here, like with the highway running through it. So he sold this back 40 and moved over here. Otto has another back 40 on the right here. Anyway, it's another plat map, but there are some notations on here, including this dotted red line that is showing me that right through Otto's property was a trail. Now, these could be ancient, could be evidence of a trail that's 1,000 years old, or it could have been 100 years old, or it could have been used over hundreds and hundreds of years, which seems kind of likely to me. There was evidence that a trail ran right through there. The little triangle here is a campsite. The double triangle here is a village site. The little splotch right here to the left of section 30, in the left side of section 33, that is a sugar bush. So Native American sugar bush. There's evidence of a sugar bush here. You know what? I'm going to, at the risk of lengthening this, I'm going to go back here because I want to show you something. Actually, sorry about this. Just close your eyes here. I'm going to go back to the, not land economic inventory actually, but I forgot to show you something on the surveyor's field notes. So I'm going to go to surveyor. Now I can show you how I found that. Surveyor's field notes, but I also have to type in front of you, which I was trying to avoid, and that turned out okay. So surveyor's field notes, Wisconsin, this link here, Wisconsin Public Land Survey Records, original field notes, that's the one I want. And I'm going to do search, and this time I'm going to search the other way. Last time I typed in the township and range, but I know it's Brown County, and it is, let's see, range 20 east is up here, town 25 north, that's where it is. Then it was this section 33 and 34. I wanted to show you, the surveyors also made maps. So he made up on the right here, a sketch map, meanders, and a plat map. So let's take a look at the sketch map. It's an example. Oh, there's actually a few of them. All right, that's not very interesting. I think maybe it's the plat map here. I think that's the one I wanted to show you. Yes, it is. So this is a map made by a surveyor, that's original surveyor in 1840. And this is a really cool one. They're not always this detailed, but this one's fantastic because I don't know if you can see this here, but he's got the name of someone here. I cannot pronounce that name, but it says House and Sawmill. There's a mill pond. Now, this part of northeastern Wisconsin had been settled a long time earlier by the French. So that's probably why in 1840, even though it's only being surveyed now, there's lots of people around here already. Here you see there's a Tellens trading house right here, a trading post. But what triggered my memory of this was I showed you the sugar bush that is noted on that plat map in section 33 here, a Native American sugar bush. Well, here you see Lamott's sugar camp right here, section 33. So it is still in 1840, it was still a sugar camp run by, sounds like a French name, a French immigrant. And then there's more notes about a sugar camp here. So really, really interesting stuff, especially if you had, really early ancestors. Oh, here's this other thing. I forgot about this. This is really cool too. Never really researched this, but see these lines here that are going diagonally up? It says a windfall. I kind of suspect that's like a track of a tornado that had gone through or something. So when the surveyor was going through here, he noticed trees and things down in this direction. And that, I know, I've never looked at it, but I'm guessing it might have been damage or a damage path for a tornado or something that had happened in the previous year or two or a few years. I don't know how long that stuff remains visible, but really one of the more interesting of these sorts of plat maps. And again, it's drawn up as early as it can be practically for European settlers. Here's a McKay's house and tannery. I actually have an ancestor named McKay. I should look at that again. I notice something different every time. There's that lesson. Not that you guys need lessons from me, but always go back and look again. All right, let me jump forward here. Sorry for the flipping through the slides fast. And that's the rural maps. And I'm sure there are questions. The one drawback of this format is that I have to keep plowing on, and then we'll have the questions at the end. But just take note of those things that I'm missing or garbling up, or that inspire you to ask a question. Before I move on to ghost towns too, I realize I forgot another little piece that a lot of people don't know about. There was an agricultural census in the 19th century that went along with the federal census. So 1850, 60, 70, and 80. I think there was one in 1890, but it burned up with all the other census records. So 1850, 60, 70, and 80. I know it applies to Wisconsin. I'm pretty sure it applies to other states as well. So along with the federal census, they visited farmers and took down statistics as part of this agricultural census, this agricultural schedule of the census for those years. And so for every county, again, every township in Wisconsin, when we were looking at Otto's plat map, at that Otto on the plat map there in 1889, if he was there in 1880, I could look in the 1880 agricultural census under Brown County, then under Swamico, and then you go down the list and you see Otto Grady there. And it applies even if they didn't own the land. If they were renting it, they're still the farmer, so they'll be listed there in that agricultural census. And it gives details like how many acres of what crops were they planting. So, he planted on his 37 acres, this many acres of beans, this many acres of oats, this many acres he got a little plot of tobacco. He had, a horse, he had 3 cows, whatever, kind of lists in detail what kind of farming they were doing at that time. So again, another sort of snapshot of what that looked like, what their lives were like. For Wisconsin, we can go further than that, 1850, 60, 70, and 80. There's an annual enumeration of farm statistics that we have starting in the late teens and early 20s. And that goes every year up to the 1960s. It's on microfilm. And that you can look up again by county, township, look up a farmer's name and get some statistics on the kind of farming they were doing. Unfortunately, none of those are digitized. So they're either in paper or on microfilm. Actually, the agricultural census we have in the archives in its original paper volumes, and then our library has it on microfilm, but it isn't digital. You can't find it on Ancestry, so it's often overlooked. Okay, now I can move on to ghost towns. This is sort of a little breather. If you're not interested in ghost towns, go up and get something to drink, take a little walk, something like that. But every once in a while, I get questions about a town that doesn't exist anymore. So might happen on a census problem, maybe, or I've heard it happening like on a vital record. Somebody's birth certificate has a town name that you can't Google it because it doesn't come up anymore. It's really common in states like Wisconsin that had boom industries like lead mining and timber and lumber. So lumber companies move into an area, a boom town springs up as people move in, and they build sawmills and people get into logging camps. Then all the stores start, retail stores pop up to serve those people. So a town's just kind of like mushroom. And then once they log the area out and the lumber companies move on, or the mining company, if it's mining, the towns just sort of wither away again. Some of them are still there, but they're much smaller than they were 100 years ago. Others just disappear completely. So I had a question, as an example, this is a real question I had. Somebody was interested in the town of Drywood, a little village or town of Drywood that appeared on a vital record, and they could not find it. So they contacted me by email. Now, you could just look in, if you know what county it's in, you could look in a plat map from around the time that the birth happened, or the date that you saw the reference to that town, and search around and see if it'd probably be on a plat map. Sometimes I don't know, or they forget to tell me what county. This case, I think in the email, they mentioned they had a birth certificate, but they didn't tell me what county it was in. But I have a little source I use in the archives to get around that. It's like a card index created by my predecessors, archivists and librarians of years ago, typed up these little cards that show they're of post offices, but a lot of times they're little towns that had a post office and then incorporated, and that had disappeared not long afterward. And this is my first step for me, because it's a lot easier than going and searching through a plat map or a bunch of plat maps. I go and look in my little index here. Obviously, this index isn't digital, and you don't have it you don't really have it in front of you. But if you asked me about a town, I could look at it for you and scan the card, or tell you about it. Drywood is in Chippewa County, or was in Chippewa County. According to this card, it was established March 31st, 1875. We have the name of the postmaster. I don't know who would care about that. Maybe if you were a local historian, you probably would. I guess if you were a historian of Chippewa County and we're interested in Drywood, you might care about that. If you're a genealogist, you probably don't really care who the name of the postmaster was, unless it was your ancestor. I suppose it could have been, right? It was discontinued, the post office, June 30th, 1902. Okay, that gives me a time frame, and it gives me a county to look in. So then I did go and pull a plat map or a plat atlas for Chippewa County, and the best one I had for the date in terms of dates was 1888. So I pulled that plat map for 1888, and let's zoom in here, and there is Drywood. And a clue again to what happened to Drywood. You see the Drywood Lumber Company owns these big chunks of land, 440 acres here. It's Cornell University. I see this every time I do this, and I always say I'm going to look into why Cornell University had that land, and I never do. So if one of you are motivated to do that after the talk, and send me an email, that'd be another little tidbit I could throw out when I do the map thing. But anyway, Drywood Lumber Company. So probably again, Drywood was a little mini boom town, and the lumber company, once they logged everything out here, moved on, and it just sort of disappeared. Now what I would do is go back to that Wisconsin aerial image finder, and I would take a screenshot and send this I probably did this. I sent this to the person who asked me where Drywood is. And then what I would do now is I would go to the aerial image finder, look up that section, and send them a screenshot showing them exactly where it is with all the modern roads. I think at the time I actually answered this years ago, I didn't have that resource yet. So I went to a modern plat map, maybe one from an atlas they still make these things, so from 2010 or 2015 or whenever it was, and look up the same township and section. And you can actually see there's still a Drywood Creek here. So Drywood isn't completely disappeared. And over here, you'll see there's a cemetery and a church. So some of the remnants of where that town that doesn't really exist anymore are still around there. And it gives you sort of the these modern ones do often have the street names and highway names. So this is probably what I sent them. I'm sure I sent them at the time when they asked that. So ghost towns, it's not the only, that's probably your best bet. I would say, if you don't have that little index and you don't want to send me an email, or it's not Wisconsin, figure out, come up with a guess for the time period. Look at those. The plat maps are the best because they go down to the township level, and they're generally more detailed. If you look like a state map from the time, like a big highway map, well, they weren't highways, but a big, state level map, it's not going to be detailed enough to show a little town like Drywood. So for the little towns, I think I would recommend those plat maps, the best way to go. And we have, I'm going to mention this later, we have them for Wisconsin, yes, but our map collection is North America in scope. So we have lots and lots of plat maps for the Midwest and beyond. We have some plat maps that they don't even have locally in places like Michigan. And we have some people have to travel to us sometimes to find a 19th century plat map from their county that only we have. So not just Wisconsin for those plat maps. All right. Whoops. Welcome back if you went and took a break from the ghost town thing, or maybe you're not back yet. We're going to move on to cities and towns here. This is going to be shorter, so if you're getting fatigued, this isn't going to last as long as that last section or as the rural section. So hang in there, or not, if you can't really offend me because I can't see you. So maybe you can do whatever you want, and I will never know. I'll just think that you're sitting raptly paying attention to me, which, I can just imagine that. Now the beauty of this format. So cities and towns. So not all of us, if you're talking about the 19th century, I would wager that most of our ancestors were rural, but some of my ancestors in Wisconsin were in cities and towns, and I'm sure some of yours may have been too. So the plat maps don't work for the cities. By the time, what generally happens is a city or a town annexes territory, and then they subdivide it and replat it and put parcels in and all that kind of thing. So the original sort of, township 25 north, range 20 east, section, quarter, northeast quarter, all that stuff doesn't really apply once you get into the town. And the plat maps just aren't detailed enough to show the names of people living in towns or cities that only own a city, a parcel on a city block or something, or are renting or whatever. So there's other sources you have to use. My usual starting point is census record, and that's how you figure out a lot of times that somebody was in a town or city. Some censuses, at least, are really good about listing a street name and a number. So the example I'm going to talk about is in Appleton, Wisconsin, and it's a woman named Esther Lewis. Okay, and this is the 1900 census for Esther Lewis. I don't know if you can see it. I told you my eyes are not great right now. So yeah, Esther Lewis, and it says, you'll see upper along the left-hand edge there, it says College Avenue. So you guys have all seen these census records, I'm sure, and you've all run across this. It says College Avenue, and then there's a column. The first left-hand column there is a house number. If you scrolled up to the top, I didn't include it here, but if you scrolled up to the top of the census record, it says house number there. So her address, here's Esther Lewis down here, her address is 774 College Avenue. So I wrote that down, 774 College Avenue. You can see from here, quickly from the census record, that she's 38 years old. She's a widow. She's from Finland. She's got some children living with her. And it says she's a fruit dealer. She's also said she arrived in the country in 1891. So she's been in the country for about 9 years, came from Finland, and she's running a fruit stand or something, right? She's a fruit dealer in Appleton. But here's the thing, that's the address. So what do you do when you first get that? What I did, and except I didn't do this, when I did that, I forgot to talk about bird's eyes, but I'm just going to skip past that for now. What I did was I went to Google, of course, which I will clumsily do here, and did 774 College Avenue. You can see I tested this. College Avenue, Appleton, Wisconsin. Went to Google Maps and thought, I'm done. I can see a street view here. I'm right here. Now there's a Walgreens over here. There's a laundromat. It's sort of a urban strip malls and things around here. And I also see, okay, there's Locust Avenue here, and there's something called Richmond Street here. So it seems to be here on College Avenue between Locust and Richmond. And I think that I'm done. That's great. Now I can go there and see exactly where Esther Lewis lived. But it's not that simple, unfortunately, because that's not where she was. That's not where 774 College Avenue was back in 1900 when that census was taken. I figured out that that's not where it was, because like a lot of cities, Appleton renumbered its streets, and they renamed some of their streets. I mean, not surprising, right? I mean, we have a Martin Luther King Boulevard here in Madison, and it obviously was not Martin Luther King Boulevard in 1900 or 1940 or 1950 for that matter. It was later. So cities do frequently rename streets, and they also renumber them from time to time. That was really common in the early 20th century because, I don't know, maybe the cities weren't built in a very logical way originally, and they wanted to sort of make them more rational or something, and they renumbered everything. Milwaukee did that, other cities did. So how do I figure out then, since I know that that's not really where she was, how do I figure out where 774 College Avenue was in 1900? There's a couple of things that I do. Well, first thing is, I went and looked at a city directory. Now, this is another way, if you don't know where somebody lives. I found from the census that it was 774 College Avenue, but if I didn't know that, or I couldn't find her, the census taker didn't write the street number or name, a city directory is another way to do that. So a city directory, it's like a phone directory, a modern, well, I don't know how old you guys are, but I mean, I grew up with telephone directories. I talk to students who come in now, like even undergraduates, and they look blankly at me when I say a phone book because they've never seen a phone book. You know, there's who has a phone book anymore. But it's like a telephone directory, except they go back to long before telephones existed or were in common use. So for a city like Appleton, you can look up a name like Esther Lewis and see that she's at 774 College Avenue. So that just confirms what the census said. It was 774 College Avenue. But the other neat thing about a city directory is a lot of them have reverse directories. In other words, you can look up a street number and see who's there. And you can see the other people that are next door. Like sometimes it'll list their occupations and other information. So that's what we're looking at here, is the reverse directory part of an Appleton street directory from 1897, 98. And if I can zoom in just a little bit here on that, you'll see in the middle here, 774, you see Esther Lewis, 774 College Avenue. But even more importantly for this idea that, you know, I'm trying to figure out where was that in 1900 because it doesn't match up to what's there today. See down here in the lower left, it tells you with these street numberings where the intersections are. So as you go forward in the 700s here, it says you cross Morrison Street, then you continue and you hit Esther Lewis's house at 774, and then you hit whatever that is, because I can't see, because I think it's Oneida Street. It's Oneida intersects. So now I know that Esther Lewis in 1900 was between Morrison Street and Oneida Street, Morrison and Oneida. So now I have a block to look for to figure out where that was. Now, it's not the only source I have. There's also street maps. And we have a great collection of street maps. And I'm going to show you in a little bit here. That's the reason I had the bird's eye map thing. So before I leave, I am going to show you our digital map collection, because our early plat maps before 1923, our bird's eye maps, and a lot of our early street maps are digitized and on our website. They're just a little hard to find sometimes. So I'll show you how to find those, because it's a fantastic resource that not enough people use. So this street map that I'm going to show you is something I think that was online for Appleton. I looked up a street map for Appleton from 1931. And some street maps give you the block numbers or the address number ranges. So here's College Avenue right here, and you see 700, 800. So Esther Lewis, according to this map, would be here. Again, however, I was suspicious. I think, no, I can't remember. Yeah, it has locus. It still doesn't look right to me. So I went back to that city directory, and I'm relying on that city directory that it should be between Morrison and Oneida. And instead, again, it says it's by Locust Street here. This looks like the same as it was in that modern map where the Walgreens was. So I think they'd already renumbered the streets by the time of this 1931 street map. So I struck out here, And I didn't have an earlier one that had numbering on it to tell me where it was. So then I went back again to that city directory, and I knew it was between Morrison and Oneida. And if you go back to Google again and Google Maps, I don't know if it's going to take me back there. No, it takes me back here. But if you go back to that Google map, maybe it's here. Here it is. If you go further in here toward the center of the city, you'll find somewhere here Morrison. Here's Morrison. Here's Morrison, and here's Oneida. So Oneida here on the left, Morrison right here. So this is really where now there's Author's Kitchen and Bar and Yosef's Gyros and Kebabs, and there's a bowling alley. So there's no houses here. There aren't any houses here anymore, but there's still buildings, and some of these buildings might be older. And here's another place where you can do a street view and get a better idea of where she really lived. So she really lived here between Morrison and Oneida Street. Whoops, like right here, actually. Okay, so I figured it out finally. I guess the lesson is just don't assume that's the address you see in a census is the same as it is today. I'm going to take you now to Sanborn maps, the last of the big map sources I'm going to talk about for cities and towns. Again, maybe familiar with Sanborn maps. Sanborn is like a brand name. They're fire insurance maps. So they were created for fire insurance offices, and they cover lots of cities and towns all across the United States. We have a great collection for Wisconsin. We have a few non-Wisconsin cities, but most of our Sanborn maps are Wisconsin. And they would be maps that would be in an insurance agent's office. And let's say you walked in and you were in Appleton and you're Esther Lewis and you lived at 774 College Avenue. I can't remember what year I got here. I think it's like 1900 or something like that. It's right around the same time. And you want to get insurance on your business because you own that storefront that you're a fruit dealer. And the insurance agent pulls this map out and looks at it. And they look you up and you can see here 774 is right here where I'm circling with my mouse, right in the center here. It's College Avenue. You can't really see it, but on the left, Oneida is, you can see Oneida and Morrison again. It's sort of they intersect, you know you're in the right place. 774 says it's a confectionery, which kind of fits with a fruit dealer. So maybe it's candy and fruits. And she called herself in the census a fruit dealer, but it's called the confectionery here on the Sanborn map. The insurance agent also can tell that the number 2 here, it's a 2-story building. It tells it's got a 30-foot storefront or a 30-foot front on it. I think it has a shared, the wall here between this and 772 only goes up 1 floor, which means they have a shared attic space with the building next door. The pink means it's made out of brick, and it has a little addition, a little section on the back there. It's next, you look up and down the street here, there's a tobacco dealer, there's a furniture store, a variety store, shoe store. The blue here on the corner means it's masonry, so it's like not brick, it's masonry. Yellow means it's a wood, there's a wooden structure. So what the insurance guys trying to figure out, or insurance agents trying to figure out is, what is the fire risk here? How much are you going to have to pay in insurance? So they look at, okay, she's in a brick building. That's not bad. That's good. It's better than wood. But a few doors down, there's a tobacco dealer. There's also this wooden structure back here. That's also a cigar factory. I don't know if you can see that upper left cigar. That's really bad because there's a high chance of a fire there. So I bet everybody on this block had to pay a little more insurance, even though they're in brick buildings. But for us, we can tell a lot about this block when Esther was there. Like, who are the other businesses? What are the other businesses? You know, what are the buildings made out of? They're all mostly 2 stories, so you can kind of visualize maybe what they look like and what's going on in that neighborhood. You could, of course, look at the census again. Go back to that census, in 1900 census, because the census taker kind of went door to door too, and find out about the families that are living, more about the other families, her neighbors that were living in these buildings, occupations, but also she's from Finland. She's an immigrant, only been in the country for 9 years, who's living next door, who's living across the street. Again, if you want to go the extra mile, maybe you don't, but if you want to figure out more about what that might have been like living there in 1900. Sanborn maps also have keys usually that break down all those things I was talking about, like number of floors and whether they're iron windows or there's a firewall. Again, it's all meant to tell you about, the fire risk. Here's the building construction materials: yellow are frame, meaning wood, red is brick, blue stone, so forth. Now, I hesitate to show you this next slide because people often come to us asking for a photo of their ancestors' building or house, and the chances that we have something are very, very small. You guys all know that, but I mean, there's sometimes, I think, younger people today who walk around with a camera in their pocket everywhere think that there must be a picture of everything, because why wouldn't there be? You got a camera in your pocket. You can take a picture anytime you want. Well, we know that wasn't true in 1900. So there had to be a reason for somebody to take a photo. So usually the best way to find a photo of a business or a house is to track down the descendants of people who live there, because they're the most likely ones who have taken one. We do get photos though, and we do get postcards, and this is a business district. So this is in Appleton on a main drag. College Avenue is kind of the main drag. So there was a decent chance, and I did found this postcard in our collection, and you notice here that it's near the intersection of Oneida Street. So it's looking in a direction, it's looking toward Morrison. So this is like looking down the street where Esther Lewis is, where all those, you saw on the Sanborn map, all those 2-story buildings you see here, and some 3-story. That's probably that masonry building on the end. And down here on the left is where Esther Lewis was. So again, taking all of that together, let's say you looked at the census, you got a sense in 1900 or so who was living in those buildings, what the businesses were. You're interested in Esther Lewis. Now you can sort of get a view and sort of imagine daily life there, as a fruit vendor, as a recent immigrant in Appleton, Wisconsin. So that one worked out pretty well. I actually found something. Okay, I'm sure I forgot stuff, but I've already talked for over an hour, and if you let me go, I'll talk forever, literally. So I think I'm gonna, I talked about I want to show you our map collection. Let me just do that, because that's really important, because there's some great resources up there. It is unfortunately kind of hard to find. So this is our homepage, wisconsinhistory.org. And the reason it's hard to find is because it is a separate digital collection. So you can't search for something in this website search box and find it. It won't come up. You have to go into the map collection, into the digital map collection, and then search. So here's the trick. Here's our homepage. The middle of the page has this Explore Our Collections button that I'm circling here. Explore Our Collections. Choose that, and then there's a center column called Online Collections. And a lot of these online collections in this center column are things that they contain things that won't turn up if you search our website generally. You've got to go into that digital collection and then search, which is unfortunate. And our IT people have been working for a long time. They're still working on trying to integrate everything so you can search everything from one search bar, but we're not there yet, and we're not going to be there for a little while. So this is the way you've got to do it. Scroll down that center column. You see maps and atlases here in the middle, maps and atlases. I'm going to wait a second to catch up. There we go. Click. All right. Now, counterintuitively, it says browse here. So we're still not there. This is about our maps and atlas collections. You got to click browse here. And then even more counterintuitively, with apologies to our IT people, you have to click browse the collection again. But you guys, you don't have to remember all this. I'm sure you can sort of blunder your way through it like I did many times before I got it down. Browse the collection again. Now, finally, you are in this digital collection of maps. And there are 6,000 plus maps in this collection, mostly Wisconsin. But I can tell you, for our purposes, all of our pre-1923 plat maps and atlases, all of them for all 72 counties of Wisconsin are up here and scanned. All of our pre-1923 Sanborn maps for all of the 100 plus cities or towns, even little towns have Sanborn maps sometimes. Pulaski, Wisconsin, there are a couple of Sanborn maps for. So all of the Sanborn maps before 1923, and 1923 is a cutoff because of copyright. We didn't want to violate copyright, so it's the earlier plat maps and earlier Sanborn maps are on this website, and then lots of other maps, street maps from cities, highway maps, railroad maps of the state. There's tourism maps that show things like resorts, in northern Wisconsin from the 1940s and 50s, and there's all kinds of stuff. The state ones, like the tourism maps, we don't worry about copyright on, so we do have some later ones there. So, okay, let me just quickly show you like an example of, we'll do that Appleton Sanborn map. So I'm going to do Appleton in the right-hand corner here. And then there's types of maps on the left here. If you did there are land ownership maps. So that's like a plat map, land ownership on the left-hand side here. I'm going to click Sanborn map. Appleton 18, I bet 1901 is the one I did for Esther Lewis, but I'm going to do 1883. It's going to be a little smaller set, and pick a page here at random. And then another thing I just want to show you is this little blue square here. So you navigate on the right-hand side for the pages, or you can click the little arrow on the right here to move forward. But this arrow here in the upper right is important. Click on that, and then use your scroll wheel or use the plus and minus in the left to zoom in. These are all up here in really great detail. So a plat map, you can read all the names on, and you can see all the details on these Sanborn maps. So bird's eyes are in here too. I didn't really show, I'm not going to show you the bird's eyes right now. You've probably seen them. They're not photographs or an artist's interpretation of a bird's eye view of a town, but we have some of those up in this digital map collection too for towns like Appleton and Green Bay and other cities. And you can find those at various years and zoom in on them as well. All right, I am going to stop here and let Katie cut in maybe and tell me if there are any questions that you guys have.
Wow, thank you as always, Lee. I mean, I could listen to you all day talk about maps, and there's always something I learn every single time I talk to you. It's like, wow, I had no clue about that.
Don't tempt me. Don't tempt me. Yes.
We did
don't encourage me.
Yeah, we did have some questions, lots of
Sure.
really great comments too about how excited people are to dive into these map collections and test it out. Some people are wondering, maybe you've answered these questions already, but people
Sure.
are wondering, are all plat maps on the Historical Society site?
Yeah, and as I said, the ones up to 1923 are roughly is sort of like a copyright cutoff date. We have many, many plat maps that are after those dates. In fact, like plat maps, if you guys are familiar with them, a lot of times in Wisconsin, the earliest ones are about 1859. There's a few partial plat maps that go earlier than that, but some of those southern counties around 1859, 1860, 1861, and then they don't create a new map, either a sheet map or an atlas, usually for 10 or 15 years. So there's big gaps. So like, let me give you Dane County as an example, because that's where we are, and those are the ones I use the most. We have 1861, then 1873, then 1890, then 1899, then 1912, and going forward. So there's big gaps in there. But as you go forward, once you get past the 1920s, they start publishing them almost every year. So from the 1950s forward for Dane County, we almost have every year, 1950, 51, 52, 53, 54, all the way up. None of those are digitized. There's still some of those companies that publish those maps are still around. So we would be treading on thin ice if we started putting those up on the web, but if you come in person, they're all available to you. But you can also, see my email address up there, or do you see you probably don't, let me click on that. So you see my email address up there. You can send me an email. So people do that. There's a limit to how many I can look up, you can't give me a list of 20 names and then I try, but just say like, do you have a plat map for Swamico Township from about 1950? Tell me what county it is, and you tell me that's Brown County. I'll go and I'll pull that map and scan that page that has that township and send it to you by email. So you don't have to necessarily visit us in person to see all those. But I'm guessing we probably, when you count all the counties in the state, we probably have the best collection of plat maps for Wisconsin. We have all the 19th century ones. It's rare that I find one or I hear of one that we don't have, but we might have there might be a few missing.
Yeah, and check local libraries as well. Obviously, we in
Oh, of
Appleton have
course.
Appleton Plat maps, of course, that you don't have to drive to Madison to get. So
Thank you for mentioning that, because I refer people all the time to the public libraries and the local historical societies and the area research centers that I mentioned before, like UW Oshkosh and UW Green Bay, because we can't have everything. And again, yeah, you don't want to have to come down here. Although Madison is great, right? I mean, it's a nice place, but you don't have to come down here.
Yeah. And some of those people who are outside the state, it's not easy to just travel to Madison quick.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
People are wondering, can you download the plat maps or any of the maps that you found on the Wisconsin Historical Society website?
You can. Let me go back there. Maybe I'm just going to click on here. Unfortunately, it's not. Wait, let me see. Maybe I'm going to find it again, I guess. Maybe you can ask me another one while I'm looking at this one.
Sure. People are wondering what the black dots are in the plat maps mean. I think somebody pointed out that they're houses, possibly.
That's right. They're buildings. Yeah, it's they don't mark every building, but it is basically if there's like the spot where the house and the barn. That's roughly. I wouldn't take it to the bank as being like a, let me pull one up here. We'll do. Are you guys? You can see my screen, right?
Yep.
Let's pick. What you guys are in Dodge? Is that right? Or
we are in Outagamie County.
Outagamie, I'm sorry. Oh, Appleton.
Appleton's
that's right.
Technically part of Outagamie and Calumet and Winnebago, but mostly in Outagamie County.
Yeah, I was thinking I had Oshkosh in my head for some reason, but I grew up in Green Bay, so I'm familiar with I'm familiar with the area, but I at least pronounce Outagamie correctly, which is something that a lot of people don't do who aren't from the area. So here's a map of, that looks like maybe German. I'm going to click on this one, Outagamie County. So the first question about downloading, on the right-hand corner here, I just opened it up, the little download symbol. You can do a medium, which is small. You get up to 2000 by 2000. I mean, for a lot of maps, that'll be fine, like a page from an atlas. This is a really giant map, so it's possible that that's still not as much big as you would like. You could contact us, and I mean, you could order a reproduction if you want. I mean, that would cost money from our digital lab, or if you want a little part of it. Like again, if you try to download this and you can't read it to your satisfaction, but you're really only interested in one township, I would take my phone, my camera or something, and pull out that original and take a picture of it and send it to you. I'm going to zoom in on this one here, so that we can look at the little black dots. Yeah, so they're all over the place here. So sometimes you'll notice that here, I'll show you this too. There's another little trick. See in section 33 here of wherever we are, or I know I lost track of where we were, but we're somewhere in Outagamie County. W.B. Williams right here owns 110 acres. And then there's a little line going across the section line here in the road. There's a road there. That means W.B. Williams also owns this 80 acres here. So he owns all of this, he or she, and it connects to this 80 acres over here. And that's where the house is, this little dot. So the house is not on the 110 acres that has his name on it. It's across the street or across the road in this little dot. So you'll see all over the place, it's a little squiggly little kind of connecting line. It's just showing across a section line or across a town line that the same person owns both chunks of land, and where the dot is giving you a clue as to where the house was. And I showed you like how some of these maps show schoolhouses too, like rural schoolhouses. And I can tell you, and you're not going to be surprised by this, but I can tell you from following up on these and driving to those areas, you'll often find the one-room schoolhouse still sitting there. Like maybe it's abandoned and the ruins are there, but you can see where it was. And I found ancestors' houses from the 19th century still there. The farmhouse is still there, from basically using this and then Google Maps and my phone and driving over there. And the house is old enough to be, and it's in roughly that right spot. It can be really useful.
Cool. And you've even got my ancestor on the screen right now.
What?
And Thompson in section 35.
You're kidding.
You must be in like Bovina, Shiocton area.
Wow. Right there, right?
Yep. And then
how lucky is
right
that?
above is Jacob Scott. So that's another ancestor of mine. So those are my ancestors.
Great. Almost like it sounds like we did not plan this, but that's
we did not, but that was kind of cool.
Okay.
Someone's wondering if you know the origin of the term plat. Like, where did that come from?
Wow, that's a hard one.
Right?
You guys are, I don't know. I have to be honest. I really don't know. I don't know where,
Yeah.
yeah, that's an interesting, use that word for so long and I've never thought about like, where does that come from?
Yeah.
You know, I had somebody tell me once, I use township all the time too. And somebody who was being very picky and visiting once told me, Wisconsin officially does not call them townships, they're town. But all the plat maps use the word township. It's the same idea, it's just a different word. Township, town. The confusing thing is that you can have a town, sometimes people refer to, which is really more of a municipality, like an incorporated village or something, as a town. In Wisconsin, the town is most commonly the rural township, those big, that like you said, I don't know which one you said, Shackton, is that a township
Yep.
in Outagamie County, or Swamico was a township or a town. It's really the town of Swamico. It's the rural town, not a municipality. That can be kind of confusing.
Sure. Someone's wondering, do all states have something like plat maps? Yes, they do.
Yes, they do. Yeah, that sort of method of surveying, assigning a town and range and section, that's the way the federal government did it as territories opened up. And I told you, like the survey in Wisconsin's 1830s to the 1860s or so, going from southeast corner up to the northwest corner of the state, that follows almost, that really follows the immigration patterns too, because people don't move in until the land's open up for sale, right? And so the different later waves of immigrants tend to be in those, further north as they move to open up territory and open up land for sale. So yeah, but I don't know. If you figure that out, let me
Yeah,
know. If I
someone said in
remember,
the chat that Google says it's the flat part of the sword and it's from Middle English.
Okay, so it's a flat, maybe a map, kind of a flat chunk
Yeah.
or section, or yeah, interesting.
You'll learn something new every day.
Thank you.
Someone said, this might be a stupid question, but I noticed the typeface on the plat maps you show has the exact same typeface as the ones I've looked at for Iowa. Who actually made these maps? Is it the same company making the maps for all the different states, or is that just a coincidence?
No, it's not I don't think it's a coincidence. There are a couple of really big ones, and this one that we were just looking at happens to be W.W. Hickson. Hickson was a big plat map maker, and for many, many years, there's tons of Hickson maps. Rockford Map Publishers is another one that's a 20th century one. So no, it tends to be the same companies, especially probably in the Midwest. I don't know about the East, but yeah, same companies. So it's probably, they're not local. These are big companies that come in and do these, these plat maps.
Great. Someone says, when you look at the plat maps in person, do you take photos of it, or can people make a copy? Like, how do you handle that?
So the ones that are in the 20th century tend to be smaller. So they're like 8.5 by 11. You've probably seen some of those. Like, you can buy them now. They're spiral bound. There'll be a little spiral binding or something. Those are fine to put on a scanner. We have scanners in-house in our reading room, and you can put one of those on the scanner, no problem at all. The bigger ones, like that 1889 one I showed you from Brown County, that's too large and too fragile to keep flipping it over. So we don't allow anybody to scan that, not on a scanner, not to flop it on a scanner. This big one you're seeing here on the screen from Outagamie County is way too big to put on a scanner. Although I have to say, the original of this, as I recall, somebody years ago cut it into 6 little sections, probably to make it easier to handle and read, so you're not handling a big map every time. So we've stitched it together digitally. That one, maybe if it's encapsulated, I would allow you to put on a scanner, sort of a judgment call, but you could always use your phone, always use a camera, which is a lot easier than it was when I first started at the Historical Society, because not many people walked in with a camera in their pocket. Yep. But now almost everybody has one. So no problem to take pictures at all. And again, if you can't make it and you have a fairly a size request that I can handle, I'm happy to pull one and take a picture for you too, if I can do it.
All right. Our next question, someone said they found a plat map for an ancestor that was still listed his name at least 5 years after his death. His wife was still alive, but she had different initials. So do they keep it in the man's name until the spouse dies?
No, I think what happened, well, I don't think so. I'm not an expert on the sort of probate law and all of that, but my guess, my gut feeling is I'll often see on plat maps, it'll say, let's say Otto Grady died, and it says O Grady EST or estate. So it's the Otto Grady estate that owns that property. I think it just means it hasn't formally transferred to IDA. It hasn't, the probate process hasn't completed. Sometimes probate can drag on for a while. So that's where it happens. You look at probate records, it's when there's some sort of question, like there wasn't a will or there was some sort of problem, and it doesn't immediately, the property doesn't immediately transfer into somebody else's ownership. But it's not automatically well, the gender part of it is that, early on, women were not allowed to own property in Wisconsin. And then later, just typically it was in the man's name a lot of times. But the woman at that point, like by the time you're looking at a plat map in the later 19th century and early 20th century, women could own property. So it probably was just a matter of the probate not clearing yet, the transfer of the land not legally happening quite yet. Because once it all probate settles, then the Register of Deeds has to record, the land wasn't purchased, but they do record that land transfer to another person's name. But for a while, something could be stuck in probate and it just would be under the person's name with estate after it or EST.
Yeah. And don't forget, our next session, February 11th, is going to be all about probate. So we can learn how probate is a very long process sometimes. And the other thing I wanted to point out was, you see the initials on plat maps. Well, maybe you're making the assumption that, it's still listed under that ancestor's name, but maybe it's a child that inherited that land and has the same initials, unfortunately.
That's a good
don't
point.
Always make that assumption that it's still your ancestor's name.
Good point.
Let's see, our next question. Sometimes I know what county, but not what township the ancestor lived in, and it's really hard to find a name. Can one do a search of the plat maps to find out where specifically a person owned the land?
That's a great question. Unfortunately, no. Not at least the ones that are on our website. Someday, if we have we could maybe harness a bunch of volunteer labor to have people read all the names on the plat maps and enter them into a little database. There was something done like that, but it was years ago, before computers. For a lot of Wisconsin counties, there was a major project that was done through like these area research centers around the state. I think this was probably in the 70s and 80s, where they had volunteers and workers go through these plat maps and on little index cards, paper index cards, indicate a name, and then which township, range, and section they were in. So they made an index, a card index, basically to a bunch of plat maps for a lot of Wisconsin counties. Then they microfilmed those. So we do have microfilm, not really what you want to hear, right? I mean, we have microfilm of cards that were made for a lot of counties. Almost nobody uses them though, because I don't want to go on microfilm and look up I'd rather spend a bunch of time looking at a map, I suppose. Occasionally, the later plat maps that we don't typically have on our site yet, but the ones from the 1920s and later, a lot of times they'll come with a farmer's index in the back of them. So an alphabetical index. And if once we are able to scan those entire atlases, you could scan to the back, go to the back of the atlas, and there'd be a alphabetical list of names, pages with names, and it would tell you again which township and section the person is in. So some of the later plat maps come with a little index like that. We have those microfilm indexes. If you really are intrepid and want to come in and look through that microfilm, in advance of a visit, I could tell you they're in our catalog. I could tell you which counties are covered if you want to try that. Otherwise, unfortunately, the only other thing I would say is that if you go back and look at the census record that you found somebody in, or if you can find them in a census record, it tells you the county, and it should also tell you the town or the township, like Swamico or Shakton or whatever town it is. That helps it narrow down. Then at least you have that one square within a county to look through. You still have to kind of read through all those little names, but it's something. It's something that can help.
And I would like to say, check your local library or local historical society. If you are somebody who has Outagamie County ancestors, we at the library do have a plat book index for a couple of our plat books.
Wow.
I can tell you it's not a perfect index. I just threw the link in the chat. We have 4 different plat maps indexed on there, and I was one of the volunteers who helped index them before I became the local history librarian. So I can tell you it's very difficult to read an A from an O sometimes. So, you know, you might need to get a little creative on trying to find your ancestor, or just going through the whole list of years to see if you can spot your ancestors. But
another great reminder, there's all these hidden, a lot of the local libraries and historical societies and those ARCs, area research centers, have their own indexes, and got to keep looking. Thanks for the reminder again.
And we even have, you know, links to then the digital one. So you find your ancestor in a certain township and range, and then you can click right on the link to get to the 1889 plat then, and then you go to that page and go to that township in that section, and then you see your ancestor in that square. So
I'm envious.
We make it pretty simple for you guys.
That's great.
Yeah. Unfortunately, not every library has that, but we have some of them. Let's see. Someone's wondering, do you have to be a member to use the Wisconsin Historical Society website?
Absolutely not. Nope. Completely open to the public, completely free. www.wisconsinhistory.org. Let me go back to my last. Whoa, sorry, you can't see what I just did here. From current slide, and then there we go. So, well, it's I guess the website's not on here, but it's basically wisconsinhistory.org, the last part of that email address, askarchives@wisconsinhistory.org. There are some things you have to pay for if you want to order, like a copy of a Civil War service record, or a birth, death, and marriage record, or if you want to order copies like that, there's fees, but there's no fee to use our website and search our website. You know, download those maps, and when you see them, you know, and there's no fee to visit us either. And we're open to the public Monday through Friday, from 8 to 5 in the archives, 8 to 7 in the library, and then 9 to 4 on Saturday as well. People, you can walk in. There's no appointment. You don't have to be a member. You don't have to be a resident of Wisconsin. You don't have to be a citizen of the United States, or, you know, you come in. We do ask in the archives, like most archives, we ask to see a photo ID and have you do a registration the first time you come, because all of our stuff is most of it's one of a kind and rare, and we just treat it like a rare book room. No food or drink, and no pens. You don't want you to spill coffee on a Thomas Jefferson letter or something like that. So.
All right, the next question. Several sources cite for her ancestor that it's near Lacon or Lacone. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, Illinois. But today, near could be up to 50 miles. So what radius would you apply to the 1870s when thinking about, you know, where to look on a map?
Boy, that's a good question too. I don't know that there's a. I do think the question leads this way, and I think you're right in implying that we think of it differently now than they did then. We certainly do. 1870s, to travel 50 miles was a day at least, probably. I mean, in rural areas, you're talking about unpaved roads, you know, either walking or horse or horse-drawn wagon. It's going to be the distances were a lot more stretched out, which is why, like in Wisconsin, I presume, we're missing so many vital records from the 19th century that weren't registered with the county, because people would have had to travel to the county seat, and that was just too much time, to get to the county seat to travel. Even if it's only 10 miles. So I do think if it says near, I don't know. It's just a guess. What do you think, Katie? I would think probably 5 to 10 miles, maybe, or maybe
I'd say
closer,
at that time
probably.
Period,
yeah.
I would say, yeah.
It would take a long time took a lot longer to travel.
Or, look to see what other resources you can find that would be around that time period that would maybe get you a little bit more closer than near that certain city or town. Let's see. I think those are all the plat map type of questions. I'm trying to kind of put them kind of like questions together. Let's see. The next question, do other states have something like the Wisconsin Historical Aerial Finder site that you are aware of?
Oh, I don't know. Let's do some Googling after we're done here and see. That's a great question, because I'd like to know. I do know that I've run into some counties have things, because I've run into Dane County it doesn't have the sort of section lines and all of that on it, but Dane County here has its own aerial views. And so Robinson Map Library has the 1937-38 set of aerial photos online. They have aerial views surveys of the state going forward from that for lots of other years. They just aren't digital. So 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. So if you're looking for more aerial photos of the state of Wisconsin, definitely check with them. But even Dane County has some aerial views of the county that the county government must use for planning and things, and they're available to the public. And they're from like the 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s. One time I had a question. I get these kind of questions. I get all kinds of questions. So somebody sent me an email saying, where near the Beltline outside of Madison, where the Wendy's is now, what was there in 1980? So I'll ask you questions like that. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm flattered all the time at what they think I could find out or what I could know. But I did find a Dane County aerial photograph on that website of that area that showed. I don't remember what was there now, so I kind of led you down a path there. I don't remember, but it was something, and I could show them and I could send them a photo. Those modern aerial photos are pretty detailed. So that's our assignment. When we're done here, if I can remember that long, I'm going to search to see if I can find other states.
Yeah.
To give some context, the Robinson Map Library on campus has the cartography department for the University of Wisconsin. So they use these aerial surveys. These aerial photos are used to make maps, and they're used to make different kinds of maps and to study. So that's the function there. So if there are other ones in other parts of the country, I would look for the main university in the cartography department of that. And if they don't have them online, they might know. They would be able to answer. So if you're living in Iowa, University of Iowa or Iowa State, probably University of Iowa, that's right. Look on their website, look for the cartography department, ask somebody there. Because even if they don't have them, they need those to make maps and to compare things historically. They've needed those over the years to make maps. The aerial, they still do regular aerial surveys that, to make maps, aerial maps, aerial photographs. So that's what I would check with.
Yeah, definitely. I would recommend, looking at the statewide historical society or genealogy society, reaching out to them or local libraries in that area, because they're going to be the experts in their own location. Unfortunately, we can't be the experts for all of the states or all of the countries, but, we're fortunate in Wisconsin to have lots of amazing resources through the state. So.
Good point again. Thank you for making that plug for the local historical societies.
And just to reiterate, what year the historical aerial image finder, it's the 37 and 38?
That's correct. The photos that are up there are from the 30s. Yeah, 37, 38.
Perfect. Let's see. Does Ancestry or Family Search have surveyor notes? I don't know that I've seen them on there. I think I've seen some on the Bureau of Land Management site.
Yeah, that's the one I showed you guys. That is the Bureau. So that series is a little funny because we have it on microfilm. So do they, the Bureau of Land Management. They're the ones that scanned it though and put their copy on the website. And the it's the Board of Commissioner of Public Lands for Wisconsin that has the surveyor notes. And their function is to manage state properties. And they go all the way back to territorial days. They go all the way back to the 1830s and certainly to statehood. They were responsible. I don't want to go on this tangent, but the federal government, when they surveyed the state, they gave some land to the state of Wisconsin that Wisconsin could use to raise money for government funding, like for education, for example. That's the most famous example. They gave section 16 of every town, that was surveyed, they gave to the state of Wisconsin to fund education, like public education, schools, eventually universities. They used that. Wisconsin managed that property and sold it off to people to raise funds. The Board of Commissioner of Public Lands is the agency that still does that kind of stuff today, that did it ever since statehood. And they have their own records, so I should give them a plug too. They had a land archivist there who retired a few years ago, and they have not filled that position yet. But there's a lot of records. The original, if you're ever looking on the Bureau of Land Management site and looking for a land patent, a federal land patent, and you cannot find it, and you look, and I just had this yesterday. Somebody can't find a land patent they know should be there from 1848. So it's a land grant from the federal government to a person. And they said they looked, and they're in section 19 of a particular town, and there's nothing listed in the Bureau of Land Management site for section 19. I haven't finished that question yet, but my suspicion is that was a section that was given to the state of Wisconsin for some fund purpose. So the record of the sale, the original sale, is not going to be in the federal. It'll be at the Board of Commissioner of Public Lands, because they're the ones that then took that property, sold it to a private party. Maybe probably that person's ancestor used the money for some other purpose. So there are some land records that we don't have, that the federal government doesn't have, that the Board of Commissioner of Public Lands does. If you have any ancestors that bought property in section 16 of your township, that was probably the record's probably at the Board of Commissioner of Public Lands, because that was the education chunk,
Yeah, and I want to say the BLM federal site too.
Yeah.
For people outside of Wisconsin, they do have some survey notes and field notes.
They do.
Okay. On there, as well as the land patents that Lee had mentioned. So check that out. I threw the link to that in the chat as well.
Thank you.
So someone's wondering, you had mentioned other alternatives to the agricultural censuses. Could you remind us what you said?
Sure. It's called the Annual Enumeration of Farm Statistics. So let me just find it here while I'm talking. I'll go to this and then go to our website. This is a little good for those of you that have the stamina to still be here. This is
There's still plenty of people here. They are eager to hear all of your knowledge.
No, you guys are you're gonna give me a big head here. So I tell my wife that she's over there that everybody wants to hear all my knowledge. All right, sorry. All right, so let's see. So this is our website again, right? Actually, this is our website, wisconsinhistory.org. I went to explore our collections. I showed you the digital collections on this page. Probably less than 0.1% of our archives collections have been digitized. I mean, we have hundreds of thousands of pages of things digitized, maybe 1 million pages when you count newspapers in the library, but that's still only a tiny fraction of all the sources and resources that we have, people's letters and diaries and documents, and only a part of our maps have been scanned. So the Annual Enumeration of Farm Statistics is one of those collections that is on microfilm and is not digital. All of those are described though, like you guys at the Appleton Public Library have an online catalog to search for books and DVDs and whatever else. We have an online catalog to do books, cover books and DVDs and things, but it also describes our archives collections. All of our archives collections are described in the catalog. So over on the right here where it says search our catalogs, this is a tricky one because what in the world would you search for if you didn't know the name? You really wouldn't be able to find it. You'd have to ask me anyway, but I know it's called the Annual Enumeration of Farm, and I think it's statistics. I'm not even really sure. Let's see if that works. Yeah, it is. Yay. It's Annual Enumeration. So this shows you, now this catalog searches the entire University of Wisconsin. So if you search for a broad thing, you might get a ton of material, way more than you want. Where it says filter by here, you can do a drop down, and sometimes there'll be multiple libraries here. That's something that only we have in the Historical Society archives, so you don't have to. But if you get like 1,000 or 1 million hits, then you can filter it by library, and Historical Society library, Historical Society archives are in there, but also the Memorial Library and the Engineering Library and all the other ones on campus. You can separate by format, which is, we have a computer file. I wonder what that is. Microfilm, and maybe the modern version of it might be, we might have digitally now. And mixed materials is a weird term that librarians, no offense, Katie, but librarians use to describe manuscripts or archives materials. I don't know why you guys, not you, but I mean,
I'm not a cataloger, so it's not me.
Yeah, all right. Okay, so you can filter things. I'm going to choose Annual Enumeration of Farm Statistics, 1923 to 72. So that's the dates covered. Oh, this is actually a copy that's at UW Eau Claire. So system library stuff is in here too. So they have a copy of the microfilm, which is, I didn't know they had the whole thing. It's 743 reels of microfilm. So there's a copy of that at the Area Research Center Let me go to the next one, number 2, which is probably the one that's here in Madison. We have a few more because we've continued to collect after Eau Claire got their copy. We go up to 1980 now, and we have, scroll down here, just where did I see it? We have like 900 plus reels of film. Sorry,
Wow.
I'm going all over the place here. 900 reels of film. A tip for archives things. So how in the world do you figure out like which reel I need? If I want to ask for a reel of film from these 900 reels, I can tell you we're not going to send all 900 reels to Green Bay if you want them up there or something. In the upper right-hand corner of this catalog record where it says related electronic resources, most of our larger archives collections have what's called a finding aid or an inventory. So that says finding aid available online. If I click that, I get another description, and if I choose full text printable view in the middle, or if I choose context list on the left, it'll give me a little more detail. I scroll down, now it's breaking down what's on each reel. So from 1923 to 60, it's arranged first by county. So Adams, Ashland, Barron, Bayfield, Brown. So here's Brown County, and I want to look at my ancestors again in Swamico and Brown County. I know that starting in 1924, I need to get reel 38, 39, depending how far I want to go forward. I might have to get 10 reels here from 38 to 49. Then once you get on the reel, it's by year. So first 1924, then it's by township, I think, and then you find your person maybe by land description or section. I can't remember exactly how they're arranged. And it'll give you some statistics. I can actually find Harry Grady, my grandfather, under the owner of the farm's name, and then it lists all the statistics they collected for that year. So that's what's called annual enumeration of farm statistics. And that was collected by the Wisconsin Department of Agriculture every single year. I don't know if it still is. Maybe it is. Maybe if any of you are on a farm, do you have to report annually statistics to the Department of Agriculture? If you do, then your records, your statistics might eventually, the version of me that talks to people in 20 years might say it goes all the way up to 2000, and maybe your farm statistics are in there too.
Very cool. I'm excited to come bother you at the Historical Society and look at these.
Absolutely.
Now let's see. Someone asked if the agricultural censuses are online. Again, the Wisconsin ones are not, but some other states that do have agricultural censuses, they are online. Like I know I found my Illinois ancestors, my New York ancestors, like Ancestry, Family Search are the main sites that have those agricultural censuses available online.
Thank you. Yeah. I wish ours were.
Me too.
Make our lives easier.
Yeah. And I did post this in the chat, but for those local to Appleton, we actually at the Brown County Library in Green Bay, the downtown branch, they do have the agricultural censuses on microfilm, so you don't have to travel to Madison. It's a little bit closer to go to Green Bay for those.
And yeah, some public libraries and some of those like Oshkosh has that local history room, and some of the area research centers have the ag censuses on microfilm for the counties that they serve too. So like I think Eau Claire has agricultural censuses on microfilm for Eau Claire County and Chippewa, and all the ones that are done, the ones that are in their service area. So definitely, yeah, check those. I always forget to. I usually tell people to try those places if they don't want to come to Madison.
All right, let's see. Someone's wondering, how do you find an enumeration district map for a census? So this one specifically that they're asking for is like the 1850 census.
What another excellent question. Those are, do you have an answer for that one like nationally, Katie? Because I can tell you in our collection, we have scattered maps like that show enumeration districts. We have some that show voter precincts and wards for cities. Those are questions that I get all the time, but it's really scattered and haphazard. It depends on what time period you're asking for and what city or town you're asking for. And I sometimes have it and sometimes I don't. Yeah, but I haven't gone looking for like a comprehensive collection of enumeration district maps for the whole country. Have you ever found anything like that?
Yeah, so somebody already beat me to it in the chat, but Steve Morse has a site, stevemorse.org, where he has enumeration districts, and he will even link you to the actual census pages for those enumeration districts.
Wow, that's great. I got to come to these things more often. stevemorse.org.
Yep.
All right. Fantastic.
So yeah, if it doesn't list a an address, or you're looking for an enumeration district to see what district in the census, like if you can't find your ancestor in the census, you can definitely look through those maps to see where they might be in the census.
This is really helpful for me because as I said, in the archives, I tend to deal with genealogy. I tend to deal mostly with Wisconsin because that's what most of
Yep.
our sources are in the archives. But my colleague, Lori Bessler, who may have talked to you guys before,
Yep.
In the library, the library's collection is much more North American in scope. So she handles a lot of more North American genealogy stuff than I do. So this is great for me too. I don't know that I'm gonna have to check with her to see if she knows that, but she probably does.
She knows a lot. I call her my rock star reference librarian. I aspire to be her.
Yeah. I'll tell her that.
Yeah.
Right.
So someone's wondering, how would you find out if a city renumbered or renamed the streets?
Well, what I would do if I was curious about it is I would call the local historical society or one of those public libraries. Like if it was Appleton, I would call Katie or somebody at the Appleton Public Library. Milwaukee, I called when I had to deal with Milwaukee, I called the Milwaukee County Historical Society, and I have a colleague there, or I had a colleague there that I think he's left now, but that I called, and they have dealt with this over and over and over again. So they know off the top of their heads usually when the street renumbering happened, or they know and they know the guides. The Milwaukee County Historical Society, I think, has, or maybe it's the Milwaukee Public Library, has when they do a street renumbering, often they will publish a guide to like the old street number and the new one, like a cross reference, like a little pamphlet or something.
Yep.
And I think for Milwaukee, there's a couple of different places up there online that they scan and put it up because they get that question over and over and over again. So that's what I would probably do. I didn't do that for Appleton when I stumbled across this one. I just blundered through it and figured it out. But I think always rely on those local people because they know that local history way better than I do. I can't keep all of that in my head. I have no idea. So do you know when Appleton?
Yeah, so it was 1925, and our 1925 city directory has the old and the new addresses in them.
There you go.
Yeah. So right off the top of my head, I knew that. That's probably the first thing I learned when I became the local history librarian. So trust me, you want to tap into your local resources because they're going to know the area best.
For sure.
Someone said they're looking at a 1900 census for St. Marie Township in Green Lake County. There are only numbers of the order of houses, but no street names or addresses. So how would I find the actual location?
I'd have to almost see what you're looking at there. They have
I wonder if it's like a more rural area and they don't really have an exact address.
Yeah. So what I would do is if it has those section numbers and it has the township and range, you can use that aerial image finder to kind of hone in on that same, like just visually side by side. You've got that old plat map and then you've got the current map, and see what the roads are called now, because they've changed too. I had one a couple days ago where somebody said their old, I think it was an old, maybe it was a census record or something that said the farm was on German Road. But figuring out where it was on the plat map, I then used the image finder, zoomed in, and saw that it's got a completely different name now. Of course, it's something else, like a county highway or something. That's what I would do, I guess, if you can do that. If you're looking at sometimes those plat maps, they're showing a more of a municipality and they don't even list the names on there. It's because that's where the town or the village has replatted things and assigned parcels or lots, and they might have lot numbers on there and not even names. That's a little trickier, and finding exactly where that is now, again, that's probably one I would punt to the local historical society or something. I mean, there's ways to do it, but I would trust them over me on that. What do you think, Katie? I think I'd have to see it kind of.
Try to find like a city directory maybe around that time period if they were still living there. Looking at land records, of course, you're going to get that legal description of land, and then you could use
the property deed. The property deed is.
You might have to do offline research though. That's the thing that some people just don't want to do, is have to go to the courthouse to look it up. But
let me just that reminds me again. How could as I said early on in the presentation, plat maps are relatively easy, especially if you can find them online, or I have them right in my right in my building. But the property deed is the exact way to sort of find exactly when somebody acquired a property, when they got rid of it, and exact what the legal land description is. I didn't mention tax rolls, which is another great land record. And we have those for lots of counties around the state. And those are every year, and they're arranged by legal land description, so they can be hard to navigate. But if you find somebody there, you can find out who owns the property, how much tax they paid on it. And that's really great because it also shows you when top property tax goes up, that often means they added a building, maybe a barn, maybe a house. You want to find out when a house was appeared on a property. That's one way to do it. Check every year around the time you think it might be. And when the tax bumps up again, it's not for the faint of heart. You can't find them online mostly. You've got to sit with microfilm reels for a whole morning or something, looking one after another, but people do it. People do it all the time.
Yeah, especially, you know, between those census years or between those directory years, because of course we don't have every city directory or every year, you know.
That's right.
Some of those alternative records will help you make sure your ancestors still stayed there, or, you know, if they moved. Somebody asked, how do you, or where do you find old city directories? Of course, there's some digitized online. Ancestry has a really great collection. Of course, at the public libraries or historical societies, genealogy societies, they might have digitized some of them on their websites or have the physical copies in their repositories. So definitely check locally.
Yeah, they're scattered all over the place. I can tell you our library has a giant collection, not just for Wisconsin, but some other cities like Chicago and other cities around the country. So our library has a giant collection in print and in microfilm. We haven't digitized them ourselves, but there's with UW Digital Collections has some for Madison and some other cities. And as Katie said, unfortunately, a lot of the digitized ones are scattered all over the place. I think Milwaukee has digitized some public libraries have digitized some, and as you said, Ancestry. So they're kind of all over. I usually start online because there's a surprising number that are up there, and if you can get by with what's online, as you were saying, I'd rather do that than go pull out a reel of microfilm or walk into the
site
stats.
that I use is called the Ancestor Hunt. They have a really great listing of all the different directories, and they'll link you to a bunch of them that they have it, you know, broken down by state where the directories are online. So I'll pop that link in the chat as well for you guys.
Excellent.
Someone asked about the reverse directories. So they're asking, is that mostly like in the last pages of a city directory, or where do you find those reverse directories sometimes?
You know, they appear differently, and you have as much experience as I do, probably, Katie, with these, but they depends on the publisher. Just like those plat maps, there's some different publishers that publish them. They vary from year to year. Some don't even have a reverse directory, and some do. Sometimes they have a full, like the one I showed you, is sort of a full reverse directory where it lists the numbers and the names there and the street intersections. Sometimes it's sort of like an index or a crosswalk that's part of a smaller part of a directory. You know, and I think I can't think of a pattern, like whether it's the reverse is always in the back or in the front. Sometimes it takes up almost as much as the regular directory if it's more of a full one. Sometimes it's a little section. And then don't forget, just like modern phone books, they often have business directories too, or almost like a little classified ads, or almost kind of like a yellow pages. So like Esther Lewis, I didn't do it, but what I would do is probably look to see if, as a fruit dealer, she had a business ad too, or a business listing. Do you have does that line up with what your experience, Katie?
So either in the beginning or the end of the directory, usually you see that reverse. But again, you know, not everyone has those for every year. So you just got to there's usually an index or a table of contents at the beginning of the directory that will tell you where that street guide or reverse directory is. When did the Sanborn maps start and stop?
Well, from my limited experience, again, which is limited mostly to Wisconsin, the earliest ones appear in the 1880s, roughly, that we have. Sanborn isn't the only. That's a company that made a lot of them, and so they're now generically referred to as Sanborn maps. But there were other companies out there that made them. I think they're dominated by Sanborn, so that's one thing. It's sort of a generic term, and I've seen them as late as the 1980s. Like 1988, 1990. We have some for some cities like Madison that go that late. I don't know how much experience you have with those, but the pattern, obviously they were replaced eventually by, they're not printing those maps anymore. But the way they worked generally in the 19th century, when cities tended to be small, they would issue them more frequently. So let's say like 1885, they issued one for Madison. Then in 1890 or something, they issued another one. Then in 1895, another one, a whole new set every time. But then the city starts getting bigger and bigger. So in 1908, they issue a whole new set for the whole city as it is now. But then over the next 40 years, they don't issue a full new set ever. What they do is they'll issue some additional pages to get some new subdivisions that they would send to the office, and you just tack them on. And they would literally paste revisions. So they would send the office who had the maps little pieces that they had to glue in, like on a block where there's no building anymore. Now it's a parking lot. They literally glue a piece of paper over that building that was on that map that shows the new. So there must have been instructions how to revise the map, and it got revised continually up until finally, for Madison again, and this varies from city to city, in 1942, they issued a completely new set now, finally, again, with all the new revisions. But then they starting the same process again. If it was an active map, they started tacking on, gluing revisions, adding pages. So I think that 1942 map for Madison was in effect the base map all the way to 1988, but they just kept making revisions and adding new sections to that original base map all the way up till about 1988. And then I don't know of any later than that. So I'm guessing probably that's kind of a similar pattern to you'll see around the United States, probably late 19th century, maybe 1870s, it might be the earliest, or 1880s, and then up to the 1980s. I don't know how many of those survived. The thing is, they were used for a purpose. So the people in the insurance offices weren't thinking about history or historical purposes. It was they were using it. So when they were done and they issued a new map, a lot of times they probably got thrown away or discarded, right? I mean, that's out of date. They don't want to accidentally use an out of date map. So they would, so sometimes, I'm sure we were around for long enough. The Historical Society, we were around since 1846. So we have, for some cities, we even have like the 1942 one for Madison that has no revisions. And then we have a few different other ones that have varying revisions. So I'm sure we were on the lookout, in places like us in public libraries and other places were probably on the lookout for maps before they got discarded. So not all of them probably survived, but many of them probably did.
Yeah, and I want to point out the Library of Congress has a really great digitized collection of Sanborn maps. I threw the link in the chat for you guys, that they have a lot of really great digitized ones if you can't find it through the Wisconsin Historical Society. Someone's wondering, did the Wisconsin Historical Society get the town of Madison's map collection after it was absorbed into the cities of Madison and Fitchburg?
That sounds vaguely familiar to me, but that's not my area. So if you really want to know, send an email to Ask Archives, that address that's on the screen there at wisconsinhistory.org, and remind me, and I can ask our acquisitions. All right, we have a acquisitions librarian, actually an acquisitions librarian, and we also have someone who's kind of an unofficial map librarian, and I'd have to ask those other staff because I am not involved directly in acquisitions, but that you saying that it sounds vaguely familiar to me, so it may have happened. But send me an email and I'll confirm.
Do you know of an online resource to view Army Corps of Engineering maps?
What do you think, Katie?
I don't know off the top of my head, unfortunately.
I don't know of an online one, but I can tell you that I just looked for an Army Corps of Engineer map of Superior from 1899, the harbor. There's like, that's a lot of those are engineering they're engineering maps, so they're like waterways and dikes and harbors and things like that, and improvements, canals. There's all kinds of, we have a collection, we have some of those. They are federal though, so I would probably, here's give a plug to UW-Milwaukee. UW-Milwaukee, we have a great map collection, but they have sort of, among the system libraries, really specialized in maps, and there's a ton of maps that they have that we don't have. And some of the Army Corps of Engineering maps that when I was searching, I noticed were at UW-Milwaukee. So there's a good site. But anything federal, so Army Corps of Engineers, National Archives, I know it's scary. It's scary for me to contact the national because it's giant. It's giant, but that's probably when I'm done here again, if somebody has one to throw in the chat, throw a link. I've never looked, to tell you the truth. So
yeah, that's what I would guess is the National Archives or Library of Congress. That's where I would start. Or if they don't have it, they might know where, because that's, federal, not state or local for us.
Yeah.
Someone said they're a Canadian attendee. We have the Library and Archives Canada. Is there an equivalent to a Library and Archives in the United States? So that's kind of the National Archives, Library of Congress as well. And then at the state level, we of course have different, state historical societies or genealogy societies as well. And then of course, the more local level, county-wide or citywide as well. So lots and lots of resources for you where your ancestors lived.
Yeah, and I don't know if this holds for outside of Wisconsin as well. As Wisconsin has a really impressive network of local historical societies. I mean, some of them have their own buildings, and I was up at the one in Langlade. It's an old Carnegie Library, I think. It's a really big building. They have a few have permanent staff, and it's great collections and a lot of expertise. So it's a really great resource locally, counties, but also cities, and yeah.
And Mary had typed into the chat earlier about the Wisconsin State Genealogical Society's website that has really great county pages where they will link to, resources for that specific county. So you go on the State Genealogical Society's website, you pull up Brown County, for example, it's going to link you to the Brown County Library, the Bay Area Genealogical Society, so all of those local resources to Brown County. And then you can go to Outagamie County and it'll link you to Appleton Public Library and the History Museum at the Castle. So definitely check out that statewide genealogical society site and see those county pages to get links to some great local information. Let's see, someone's wondering about how you would research maps for like city lots or like larger cities. So do they have plat maps or some other kind of maps that are helpful for those ancestors who lived in large cities?
Yeah, I think the combination of city directories, Sanborn maps, and street maps, I don't know of any maps that have maps themselves that have individual names on them, because it would just be, it would just be overwhelming. The most detailed, consistent city maps I know of, the most detailed are those Sanborn maps. The problem with the Sanborn maps is they tend to focus on the centers of cities, sort of like the main, where there's mixed use, where there's residential and business and industry. They don't tend to focus on the suburb part or the outer limits of the city. So there's a lot of times you get frustrated and you can't find your place on the city, but the place you want to look for, the block or street you want. But you need another source for the name. You need another source for the address. So that's where the census and the city directories come in to figure out an address. Then when you have an address in hand, those city street maps and those Sanborn maps are the two that I use the most. The Sanborns are nice because they individually number each building with the street number. So if you're in the main part of the city or the center city, and like Esther Lewis was in my example, you're lucky because it has the number right there on that building. Most detail that you usually find, just like on modern street maps, or the street map I used to carry in my glove compartment, for cities, is it'll tell you the hundreds, like this is the 800 block, the 900 block, and so forth. But it never gets down to the individual building level. The Sanborns are really where it's at for that. Do you think, Katie?
Yeah, that's what I would say too, is all those resources that we've kind of talked about are kind of similar at the large city level. It's just harder to find because there's more people in those really, really large cities.
They're giant. Yeah, I can't imagine what the New York Sanborn map set looks like.
No kidding.
Must be gigantic. The one for Milwaukee that we have is several flat boxes. It's several volumes. It's like 8 or 9 or 10, the later one, 10 boxes of sheet maps, and you need this multi-level index to figure out like which box you need to look in or volume, and they get really unwieldy. They do. And New York is going to be even bigger. So yeah, I'm glad I don't have New York in Wisconsin. So
yeah, I'm glad my ancestors were only there for a short little time period.
Yeah.
Someone's wondering, are recorded land patents available from 1871? Yes, if you check out that Bureau of Land Management site, you know, if they were the ones who got that original patent from the federal government, you should be able to find it on the Bureau of Land Management website.
With the exception, as I said,
Of
if it
certain
was like
ones,
granted
yeah.
by the state of, you know, if for some, if you don't find them on there and you still feel like it should be there, Board of Commissioner of Public Lands has the records of sales that were made by the state of Wisconsin rather than the federal government.
Yeah, and I'll pop that link in the chat again for the Bureau of Land Management website. All right, someone is wondering about bounty land in Illinois. So I will remind you that in March, we're going to be talking about bounty land. So I'm going to encourage you to sign up for that presentation and learn more about bounty land and how that was granted and how to track down that bounty land that your ancestor would have received, because that's kind of outside of our scope today.
Yeah, I have to mark that one down. What date did you say that was?
That is March 18th.
18th. Okay.
Yes, 2 p.m. Central.
Interested in that myself.
Yeah, and Deborah Dudek is a great librarian from Illinois who is so knowledgeable. So she will give a great presentation, I promise. Someone wrote in here about the Cornell University that you had talked about before when you were talking about the ghost towns. They said they possibly invested in the land industries like mining, logging in states as revenue generator, especially if a successful alumni willed or donated land to them. So
that's almost certainly it. That's a great answer, because when you look at plat maps, I remember seeing University of Wisconsin. You know, you'll find the State Historical Society of Wisconsin as the owner of land on 19th and early 20th century plat maps around the state. And I know that happened in some cases because somebody willed the property to us as a donation. Then we turned around and sold it and used the money because we can't, you know, we're not like land speculator. We can't like manage a lot of lands. But I've been surprised from time to time to find us as the owner of 160 acres somewhere out in the middle of some rural county, because probably somebody donated it to us in their will. So that's a great answer. That's almost certainly what it is.
Yeah. Someone's wondering if you can find copies of old phone books saved somewhere. So local library. I don't feel like old phone books are as digitized as city directories are.
They're not. Yeah, and our library has some too, but libraries, phone books.
I have seen some through the Library of Congress website. So they do have a lot of good city directories as well as some phone books, especially for those kind of larger cities. So definitely check out the Library of Congress website. A couple of people are asking about copying the chat. I'm definitely going to save the transcript because I know there's tons of great links that we threw in there. And I will send out an email on Monday with a link to the recording of the video as well as a link to the chat for you guys. So definitely look for that on Monday. Someone had also typed in that they have a Pagel relative. So I think you had mentioned that this is one of your ancestors.
Really?
So they're wondering maybe if you guys could be related.
Could be. It was Martin Pagel, was in the direct line who came over from Germany fairly early. Yeah, could be northeastern Wisconsin primarily.
Yeah, so this person said it's Merrill and Rhinelander area. His name was Edward Pagel. So I'm
sure there's probably something there, some sort of connection.
Well, follow up with Lee if you guys want to share some genealogy together. So it looks like those were all of our questions, unless there's any last minute questions here. Once again, a huge round of applause and thank you to everyone. And thank you to Lee for hanging in for 2+ hours to answer all the questions and give us all of the knowledge.
No, I gained a lot too. Thank you, Katie. That was I learned a lot of stuff from this myself that I can act like I knew before next time I do this.
Sounds good. Yeah, you can always tap me to tag team on any of your presentations.
Absolutely.
And a reminder again to join us for February 11th. We're going to have Judy Russell again. Again, it's not going to be recorded, so you definitely want to be sure to mark your calendar. I'm putting the link in the chat to register for it for Saturday, February 11th. We're going to be talking about probates and wills, 2 p.m. Central. So definitely join us and enjoy Judy Russell, who is also an amazing presenter and hilarious, has a great, time telling stories and giving us lots of knowledge as well. So again, thank you everyone for joining us. I appreciate all your time and questions and interest, and we hope to see you next month. And thank you again, Lee, for all that you've given us.
Thanks, guys.
Take care, everyone. Have a great afternoon.